What's going on, everybody? It's Jay Coffee Talk. Thanks for tuning into my channel. Take a quick moment and subscribe and hit the bell. We're going to cover an interesting topic, a story, out of the hip hop world. You guys may remember John Forte. He was linked up with Wyclef Jean in the Refugee All-Stars. And, he went from a promising up-and-coming career to a federal prison bid. So basically, man, John Forte, who's now 45, and he's been home for a little while from the feds, came into the game, in the early 90s. But prior to getting into music, he's from Brownsville, Brooklyn. And, he had a education background. After school, he furthered his education. He actually went to private school, a prep school, and Talib Kweli was his roommate. They went to prep school, and he studied business, he studied arts, music, all kinds of stuff. So, Talib Kweli obviously later got into the music industry, and Ruckus Records, I'm sure you guys remember them when I was coming up in the 90s. Ruckus Records was like dope, you know what I mean? They were like underground, but street at the same time. They had a lot of dope artists there. If you remember, they had those sound bombing like compilation albums. There's actually early Eminem stuff on there. Black Star, which was Mos Def and Talib Kweli as a duo. They had that smash hit. That was a very hit album. Mos Def had the Black on Both Sides album. There was another duo called High and Mighty. Pharaoh Monch was on Ruckus. The Lyricist Lounge albums, which actually was a short-lived TV show. Big L, can't forget Big L. Cool G Rap put out some projects through them. Common, Sadat X of Brand Nubian. You know what I mean? Like, Ruckus Records was a big deal. And John Forte was actually like an executive with the label. You know what I mean? So he had a solid, background in the hip hop industry. As we just said, he worked as an executive with Ruckus Records, and then later got linked up with Wyclef Jean and the Fugees and everything like that through Lauryn Hill in the 90s as well. And if you recall, man, the Fugees, the Score album was huge. Killing Me Softly, smash hit, you know what I mean? And he actually wrote some tracks on that album. I believe he was nominated for a Grammy for his work on the album. He went on tour with the Fugees and the Refugee Camp All-Stars. And then Wyclef dropped The Carnival, which was another big hit album. And on the Stayin' Alive track off that album, that sampled the Bee Gees like disco hit Stayin' Alive. If you remember the verse where Wyclef was like, John Forte, grab the microphone and swang this way, and John Forte came in and spit a nice verse. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. Everything was lining up real nice for John Forte to drop his own album. You know what I mean? He worked with Ruckus Records. He worked with the Fugees. And on, as we said, he had writing credits and stuff like that on the Score album. And then on The Carnival, as I was just talking about, Wyclef's album, he had that verse on Stayin' Alive. I believe he was featured on other tracks, and he also produced, like, he did a lot of work on the album, you know what I mean? So everything is lined up for this dude to blow up. He also had a hit record with Pras of the Fugees off the Money Talk soundtrack that was called, I forget what the track was called, but it was another big hit. Like, that's what I'm saying. Everything is going, in this dude's favor. It's looking like a promising career. Well, then his album, Poli Sci, which I believe dropped in 99 or so. If you recall, there was a video that came out and it was called Flash the Message 99. It sampled that old song 99 Red Balloons, if you recall that, by that, I think they were like a German band, and it was an all right track, but ultimately the record, the album as a whole, Poli Sci, flopped. You know what I mean? As far as like all the magazines back then, because this was a different time in hip hop and in music magazines, their ratings, their album reviews were a big deal, and they all praised the album and said it was dope. But the album just didn't do well. It's only sold 80,000 records. And if you've seen John Forte, who just was on Talib Kweli's platform, and they talked about the album, and Kweli was saying, 80,000 records sold nowadays is a success. Back then it was a huge flop. And you can actually tune into that interview and hear John Forte talk about this all a little more. He just, was saying there was a lot of problems with the project. The project manager, who is in charge of working on his solo album, got fired right before the album came out. The label, which it was like, I believe it was a joint venture between Sony and Columbia, or one of them is a part of the other one, a conglomerate of the other one, didn't put a lot of money behind the budget, and it just didn't go well. And Wyclef produced on the album too. And I gotta say, I just did a video recently on this channel about rapper Cannabis, and he was all set for success as well. I'm gonna do more about Cannabis, but anyways, Cannabis criticized Wyclef's producing, like beats and things like that. John Forte, I don't know, I've never heard him criticize Wyclef, but nonetheless, that's two artists that he worked with, and their albums flopped, you know what I mean? But to John Forte's credit, he did a lot of producing on his own, so I don't know exactly the level of involvement that Wyclef had with his album. So anyways, the album flops, you know what I mean? He's talking about that he was using, drugs during making this project. Things, everything seemed lined up for success, as I kept stating, just a solid background in the hip hop industry. But when it came time for John Forte's album to drop, things didn't go well. As he, said on Talib's Kweli's platform, which I urge you guys to go all check that out, he said it was just a brick. It was just no good. The label ended up dropping him, and things went bad for him. So he had to make money. He had to get by. He was using drugs. And, as he stated, he didn't necessarily be like, now I'm going to be a drug dealer. But things just kind of worked in that direction. And he got involved in, trafficking, which, didn't turn out to be a good idea, because in 2000 at Newark Airport, he got caught up in a sting. He was delivering, listen to this, $1.4 million worth of liquid cocaine, which is 31 pounds. That's a lot of coke. And, he was talking with Kweli about how he never actually delivered it to the courier himself before. This was the first time he did, and it was indeed a setup. You know what I mean? And I had to look, I was like, what exactly is liquid cocaine? So liquid cocaine, as you know, cocaine comes from the cocoa leaf, but there's a whole process, where it's broken down, and a lot of different things are done to process it and turn it into powder cocaine. But there is a way it can be turned into liquid cocaine. And, a lot of drug smugglers, operations like to do this because it's easier to avoid detection. As we know, with technology and everything, they crack down on catching these guys. They can put the liquid cocaine inside condoms, and it can be swallowed. And if you end up getting scanned by a machine or whatever, because it's a liquid and not a powder, it can just look like parts of your intestine. You know what I mean? It can look like pockets of gas in your stomach, where if it's the powder, they can easily spot it through the scanning machine. There's also other ways, where the liquid cocaine can be put and dried into clothing, and then they can get it out of there and then form it into powder once it reaches its destination. there's been situations where it was like put in bottles of liquid or soap or things like that, so like when you fly, a lot of times you're not allowed to have liquids. I guess this is, why. It's pretty crazy that things, these drug smugglers and cartels and stuff like that can do. I don't know if you guys remember the movie Traffic, where the guy that was selling all the cocaine, there was like a situation where they like had toys that when they like put it underwater and broke it down, it all rinsed apart and there was cocaine in there. So it was like some stuff like that is how John Forte got knocked with all this coke. So anyways, he gets hit with 14 years. He gets convicted. He goes to trial. In that 14 years, I forget how many, 68 months. And that was on the low end of the guidelines. Do you know what I mean? Because he was charged with possession with intent to distribute, conspiracy charges, serious charges. You know what I mean? Where this the fact that when we say he was on the low end of the guidelines with the feds for each crime, their sentencing guidelines, and based on your previous record and things like that, convictions. It puts you, on that spectrum, on the low or the high end, where you fall within the sentencing guidelines. He was on the low end, so that 14 years for his conviction was actually like a best case scenario. I don't know what was on the high end of the spectrum, but I'm guessing possibly life. You know what I mean? So, he ends up speaking once again, as I keep referring to the interview with Talib Kweli. Go check that out. John Forte was speaking about how he didn't really accept that he was going to sit in prison for 14 years until after about 3.5 years, because that was when his final appeals got denied. Now, he had some people advocating for him that had some juice, and that was singer Carly Simon. From the 60s, 70s, she's been around a long time. I'm sure a lot of people who see this video, who are maybe a little older than me, know who she is. She worked with James Taylor, who was like a huge singer. This guy has a lot of hits. I'm sure you might have heard that song, I Seen Fire and I Seen Rain. I seen Sunny Days that I thought would never end. Like, she worked with that guy. She worked with a lot of very big artists in the 60s and 70s and 80s and stuff like that. And her and her son, Ben Taylor, helped with appeals. As I said, she had some juice from being such a big figure in the music industry. She reached out to people for him, but ultimately his appeals were denied. You know what I mean? They were saying he didn't get a fair trial. They were advocating for him heavy. Now, in the end, as I said, he got arrested in 2000, blew trial. He actually recorded an album called John during his time, like awaiting trial, that came out in 2001. I never listened to it, but the album, I guess, speaks a lot about what was going on in his life, facing these federal charges and everything like that. A very serious album, and he ends up doing his bid. Well, in 2008. He got out early, and it's very surprising to hear he was pardoned out of his 14-year sentence by, at that time, President George Bush, and Jr. And, when you think of the hip hop world, George Bush has never really been known to be popular in the hip hop world or to be known as a friend of hip hop, but he pardoned John Forte. This was in 2008. He pardoned 14 people, and John Forte was one of those 14. There was other people, with marijuana trafficking charges. There was people with illegally transporting pesticides. He pardoned a variety of people. Like, it wasn't all just people with drug charges. It was pretty wild, to think of that. As I said, if you guys really recall in hip hop, George Bush was never, either of the Bushes were never known to be like a friend of the hip hop world. But there's a lot of things you can go out there and read where as I said, he went to a prep school and he had this singer Carly Simon fighting for him. And there's like theories that based on the prep school that John Forte went to, connections he has through there, and with the singer Carly Simon, connected him to Bush. And, he ended up getting pardoned. I don't know the exact story of it, how it came about, but I just found that kind of like amazing that George Bush pardoned this man out of his sentence, which means he got out and he was free. It was over. It was done. When you're pardoned, it's over. The president let you go. And that's that. You're a free man. If you recall, in when Tookie Williams was executed, a lot of people were advocating, from Snoop Dogg to all different kinds of people, were advocating for him to be pardoned, as all his appeals on death row had ran out. And, at the time, the governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor of California then, I want to say this was around 2006, denied the pardon to Tookie Williams and commute his death sentence to a life sentence, and the president stepped in, so he was executed. So just Tookie Williams didn't get pardoned, but John Forte did. That's a whole nother story, whole nother debate. I'm just saying the president of the United States pardoned this man. So that's just really something interesting to think about. John Forte has continued to work in the music industry. As I said, go check out the Talib Kweli interview. A little bonus, something that I want to share with you guys is, it's interesting that this came up in this story, because recently, as I said, I was working on content about cannabis and the LL Cool J beef. Well, in like 97, 98, when John Forte was still up and coming, his album wasn't out yet. There is some really dope footage out there on the internet that has Big Pun, DMX, Mos Def, John Forte, Cannabis. I'm not sure if there's someone else there, but they're all just basically chilling in a restaurant, and they're spitting verses and things like that, because these were all artists who were hungry, who were on the come up, whose albums were not out yet. And Cannabis actually spits like a verse from Second Round KO, which was the LL Cool J diss, during this time. It's pretty cool. They're just chilling in a restaurant, talking about the rap game, spitting some verses and things like that. So that's pretty cool. You guys go check that out. But this is Jay Coffee Talk. I'm wrapping this video up. As I said, this was the story of John Forte, promising rap career, refugee camp all-star, Wyclef Jean Fuji's affiliate, who dropped a flop album, and everything went from looking up to looking down to sitting in prison for 8 years to being pardoned by President George Bush. It's all pretty amazing when you just put it in perspective and think of it all. You know what I mean? But I'm going to wrap this one up. As I said, Jay Coffee Talk, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to get up in the comments. Anyone new to my channel, it's all about hearing what the people got to say. So let's get this discussion going. If you guys have been rocking with the channel, you already know what time it is, how it goes, how we rock on this channel. And I thank you guys so much for your support. As always, much love, and appreciation to you guys. And, for all the new viewers, I also cover other music news. I cover sports news. I cover current events, true crime, all different kinds of stuff on this channel. So make sure to get up in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell. Thanks again for watching. I will catch you guys on the next video. I'm out of here. Peace.